Pointers. All right, welcome everybody. This is the competition overview and getting started for the 27th annual Be Your Own Boss Bowl. If you have any questions at any point, feel free to pull yourself off of mute, or if you want to wait until the end. We've got a good amount of content to cover, so I want to make sure that we get to everything. So yeah, let's just dive right in. So this is a pitch competition that obviously offers workshops and free mentorship. What you may not know is that there are funding and service prize to entrepreneurs that are launching high potential new ventures. What that means is that we run 3 pitch competitions through the Innovative Idea Competition throughout the year. The first 2 really do focus on that idea set. This one is mainly geared for ideas, pitches, businesses that either have launched or are kind of in that ready to launch stage. Now, that does not mean that you need to have launched or that you need to be absolutely ready to launch in order to enter the competition. There is great, like I said, mentorship, workshops, feedback, all that you're going to get regardless of what stage you are at. But that's really kind of the folks that are geared for the most success kind of historically in this competition. As with all of our competitions, this is open to Temple University community members, that is students, faculty, staff, and alum from all 17 schools and colleges. That is who is eligible to participate. The first thing that I want to highlight for folks is Startup Tree. That is our digital software that we use to run our competitions, connect people with mentors, all kinds of other great stuff. It is not a requirement, but I would say it is very strongly encouraged that you become a member of Startup Tree before entering the competition for a couple of reasons. One, again, it's a great resource. We think it's awesome. We do not spam you with useless information. One of the things that it really does allow you to do is to save your submission to be entered at a later date. And so this is the kind of project that we think is best when you do not wait until the last minute. More on that later. And so it really does help to kind of map some things out, work on a couple parts of the project this week and maybe do some next week and then over spring break, all that sort of stuff. And that's just made a lot easier if you are an actual member of Startup Tree. I will send this presentation out. It will also be available on our YouTube page and our website. So all kinds of places to access this, so don't feel like you need to be scanning all of the QR codes now, but we will be sharing them after the fact. So this is the I don't know why that says mentoring with the experts. That should be the competition page, but this is the QR code that you would enter or follow to create your draft. That's going to take you to our competition page where you'll see all sorts of information, and then again the ability to create your draft proposal. The other piece that I want to utilize and encourage folks to utilize is our Google Shared Resources folder. You can see all of the things that are on there. We will also upload our workshop video recordings and the slide decks, all kinds of important information. As things come into our lap, we will put them there as well. You should be able to scan that and join now. If you can't, just let us know by reaching out to our email address that we'll also share at the end. Another piece that we like to share is that we have a network of 100+ mentors that have raised their hand and said, I want to help students with their ventures, with their pitches, with their pitch decks, with their financial statements, all that sort of stuff. And this is also on Startup Tree. Again, another great resource. So when you log on, you can go to that mentor circle at the top and scroll through all of the mentors that we have that you have access to. You can either message them directly, you can book a meeting with them. If you don't hear back from them, reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to set something up if you're running into issues. So here are the workshop series. Again, that QR code will take you to our competition page. You can scroll down and see the workshop series that we have. Next week on Wednesday, we will do market opportunity and the competitive landscape. We'll take a break for the spring break week here at Temple. We'll do preparing your financial projections and assumptions, and then wrap up with Pitching 101, basically just thinking about how to make the content that you are going to create the most consumable and the most easily digestible. We'll get into a little bit of that tonight, but that March 19th session is really what that's all about. We are trying to find some time to do an expert mentoring night or afternoon, and that is where you kind of bring your final submission or what is close to a final submission, and you can give it to some mentors to look over, give you some feedback, all that great stuff. Again, more to come on that. Wanted to share that on March 15th at 11:59 p.m., that is when submissions are due. We will announce our finalists on April 9th, and then the week of the 14th of April is when we will do pitch coaching for the finalists. And then April 23rd is the live pitch event and awards ceremony. So that is in person in the 1810 Accelerator in the first floor of 1810 Leah Chorus Walk. There are $100,000 total in cash and in-kind service prizes. So for all of our competitions, including the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, there are two tracks. Upper track, which is for our graduate students, faculty, staff, and alum, and then undergraduates, the undergraduate track, which is for our undergraduate students. In each of those, there is a first and second place. We're still deciding if we're going to do additional prizes after that, and then a grand prize. We also ask that our winners, anybody receiving a prize, participate in a startup studio program. More on that to come as we get down the line. And then we also have some alums, some friends of Temple that have legal accounting, or I'm sorry, legal firms, law firms, accounting firms, marketing agencies, design agencies, web hosting platforms. All of these folks have offered up in-kind service packages for our Be Your Own Boss Bowl winners. And so they are the ones that can also offer that up and give you some free advice if that is something that you are interested in if you become one of our winners. There's a crowd favorite award for $1,000. There's a digital innovation award. There is a global award sponsored by Cyber, and then a social good award sponsored by Sedgwick. And so lots of different opportunities for people to participate with the Be Your Own Boss Bowl. Eligibility. Need to take a minute to talk about this. So the leader of your team must have a Temple University affiliation. That means that they must be either a current student or an alum, or a current faculty member or current staff member. Again, they can be from any of the 17 schools and colleges. There's more information on that Google sheet about, I'm sorry, that Google folder about all of the other stipulations that it comes to the rest of the team makeup. But the leader of your team, the person that submits, the person that's going to be giving the pitch, must have a Temple University affiliation. We did get a little bit of we ran into this issue a little bit recently. They must be actually a degree candidate, so not just somebody that is taking classes at Temple. You need to have a Temple University affiliation, and that means you need to be a current student, not just somebody that's taking classes. So again, more on the specific eligibility in the Google folder. This can be a new business or an existing business. If it is an existing business, it needs to be less than 5 years old, and you need to have not raised more than $50,000 from external institutional sources. So that's like grants, other accelerator programs, other competitions like this. You must have a gross sales of less than $100,000, and it must be a for-profit business. We do offer our other two competitions can be for a not-for-profit idea, but this must be a for-profit business. And then we do encourage cross-discipline within teams. So if you are a student at Klein, we would love for you to get on a team with somebody from the Fox School of Business and the School of Engineering. If you are a liberal arts student and you want to pair up with somebody from the College of Science and Technology, that's awesome as well. So really encourage that cross-discipline across teams. So this format is tied to real-world requirements of accelerators as well as investors. And so that includes an investor-style pitch deck, more on that in a little bit, an executive summary that can be no more than 2 pages. It should be at least 1 page. Not, a quarter sheet or a half sheet is not good. And then a 3-year financial projection. Again, more on that can be found later in this presentation, plus in the Google Resources folder. So here are the goals for this presentation. I want to provide an overview of the topics that must be covered in your submission. I want to share some tips for thinking about structuring your submission, and then finally some tips for completing your submission. So which path are you on? And if folks can maybe just come off of mute, thinking about, is this something that is either a lifestyle or family business, not highly scalable, no exit strategy. This is something that you're going to kind of bootstrap your way through. Or is this something that is kind of falls in the more highly scalable? You're going to need some capital, need some investment in this, and you have maybe thinking about an exit strategy. For our folks that are on the call, where do you kind of fall in that first one or that second one? And if you don't know yet, that's fine too.
When you say exit strategy, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, if so, the first one is really something that you are maybe going to designate or not designate, dedicate a maybe not your whole life, but a significant part of your life to. When it comes to an exit strategy, right, you're going to work on this for a few years and hopefully get it to a point where a larger firm is going to want to buy this from you, or you're going to take it out and shop it and want to sell it to a larger firm. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay, I understand. I feel like, well, what I have in mind would probably be highly scalable, something that I probably wouldn't sell it, but it would be
Okay.
something that is sellable. So,
Okay. Great. Thank you.
mhm.
Yeah, mine is along the same lines as well.
Okay, great. Love to hear it. And again, this is there's no right or wrong one. There's no one that does better or worse in the competition. Just important to think about and kind of note that these are these are two of the categories that some of our presentations fall into. Um, so a couple of things to think about. Who should you be targeting with your pitch, and what topics should be included in your pitch deck? These are the questions that we kind of like to start with because that's an important step in kind of diagnosing which direction you're going to take your pitch in. So, an investor pitch, this is a 7-minute presentation, and that is what this competition is geared towards. There's a 7-minute presentation with an investor focus. Again, you can be in that first one, the lifestyle family business, not highly scalable, but we still do want you to give a presentation that has an investor focus. It grabs attention and it keeps by hitting the highlights, and then it leads the investor eager to know more. What it isn't is it's not a technology presentation, right? You are not in front of people that have already invested and you are, getting into the weeds of your presentation. This is not a sales presentation where you are talking to, potential customers of your product. This is for investors. Are folks kind of understanding the difference between the two?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes.
Um, One of the things that we always like to say is that your slides and the things that you are speaking about should have a good amount of alignment. In this graphic here, right, the person speaking on stage with the blue thought bubble, it's pretty big, and then what's being projected up on the screen is this pretty red bubble, or I'm sorry, this pretty big red bubble. And there's a little bit of overlap in that black area in the middle. That's not great. The first round of your submission, right? What you are going to be submitting in terms of one of your submission materials can be more text heavy because it's just going to be read by a round of reviewers. If you are selected as a finalist for the final judging, that you definitely want to be more visual because you want this area in black to be larger than what we're seeing on the screen, right? You want what you say and what you see to be in a lot of alignment, and not so much, okay, are people more listening to what you say, but then they're missing what's up on the screen because there's a lot of text, or they're reading all the text that's up on the screen, but then missing what you say because they're trying to read. So we really want to make sure those things are in alignment. Here are some things that investors want to know. A, what is the problem? The folks that we choose to be judges, or the folks that are investors, are smart individuals. They are driven individuals. They are people that are knowledgeable about a lot of things, but they're probably not an expert in your specific thing that you are pitching to them. So really clearly lay out what is the problem. And then probably more importantly than that is what is your solution and how are you different than what is already out there? And so it's probably helpful to share what is already out there and where that difference is. We'll get to more of that in a little bit. And then I like this third piece a lot. Why are you on the team to solve the problem? This really talks about the passion. This really talks about why you are the ideal candidate to address this issue, big or small. And then maybe not as important, but this is, typically what investors want to know. When will you make me money? And so that's why we ask for that 3-year financial projection, because the hope is that within 3 years, this could be, if it's not already, a revenue generating excuse me, a profit generating idea. So, you're going to take your winnings and you're going to invest them in X, Y, and Z. And then in year 2 or year 3, we will start to see money because of those investments that we've made in our app, in our clothing line, in our customer base, all that sort of stuff. This is just one example of kind of thinking about the content and flow of the pitch deck that you're going to submit for your written submission. So I'm not going to go through all these here. Again, we will share these slides out, but this is a slide that I really like because it just kind of talks about, right, in 10 slides, here is some kind of things to think about or themes for each of the slides that can really show a clear flow in terms of a pitch plan that you have. Kind of another suggested flow, right? You can kind of see where the arrows are going and the ways in which you are kind of laying out your pitch to them. This is, again, suggested one of the many options that we've come across, but each story is different, right? It might make more sense for you to have the market size and opportunity be the second thing that you talk about after the problem, or your management team might be really important, and so let's put that towards the front. Or maybe you don't really have a full-on go-to-market strategy because you're not there yet, and so that gets cut out, or that gets put towards the end. This is just a kind of quick screen capture. I know that the resolution and all that is not the best, but an executive summary example is in the Google shared folder, and this covers all elements of your business plan. So please make sure to include all of them. And again, just know that it doesn't have to follow this format, but this is a great just kind of baseline executive summary. There are 3 submission requirements for the financials. You need a 3-year income statement. You need a financial slide within your pitch deck that summarizes your income statement, and then a financial section in the executive summary. So this is going to summarize the key points from your 3-year investment. If you have a revenue model, profit margin, key indicators, anything like that, please include that there. Financial resources that you have and need, and if you need financial resources, what will you use them for? If you have an idea of cost to launch, and then any other major assumptions should also be in that financial section of the executive summary. Some people choose to have that be, everything else in the executive summary is on one page and the financials is on the back. That's been successful for people in the past. If you can spell it out that way, just something to consider. In the Google shared folder, you will see things laid out somewhat like this. Always encourage folks to read the README first. We try and put things together so that you can kind of understand everything that's in here, kind of what to expect. And maybe you already have a practical guide to financial modeling and projections. You kind of already know that, and so you just want to look at some of these different samples or templates that we have. So that's just, again, kind of a screenshot of what is in the Google shared folder. Again, before you dive in, read this first. There's a lot here, and so it's just helpful to kind of see what all this is. Thinking about the customer and the problem. So who is the user or customer, and what is their problem, and how do you know about this problem? This is another key point to hit, because how you introduce this sets the tone. Is there an emotional appeal or connection? Is this something that you ran into personally, or maybe a family member or a close friend, and that's kind of what sets you on this journey? The customer and problem kind of theme is a great way to draw the investor, draw the judge in when they're going over your presentation. For your product or service description, It's good to briefly explain your product or service. How and why does it solve the defined problem? How are you unique? Again, I've talked about that a couple of times. And then if you have diagrams, photos, or videos, you can use those. We like to caution folks to use those sparingly, if at all, because again, the technology, photos are fine. Videos gets to be a little bit troublesome unless you're, kind of bulletproof with your presentation. Also like to remind folks, this does not need to get into the weeds. This is not a sales or technical presentation. This really is just kind of, again, an overview for somebody that has limited knowledge of what you are pitching to them. If you do have a real working product or service, show it. That is a great way to demonstrate the progress that you've made, even if it's a prototype or even some drawings or a sketch, that's great. Do not build it before you've validated and been assured of the solution fit and the market fit for those. So I think it's always important to show how does it solve a problem and how does it work? And again, what is your competitive advantage? We keep coming back to that. How is what you offer different than what already exists out there? The minimum viable product. So why build something that nobody wants? So this example that I like to use is that Dropbox launched a landing page to test concept and interest. 75,000 people responded to it and signed up as subscribers, and no code was written at this point yet. So the goal that they needed to figure out was, will anyone pay for this? And they were aiming for pre-sales or subscribers, right? They had this test concept and this idea of this online, file sharing, file storage software. And 75,000 people responded and signed up without anything actually being able to do. So this was clearly something that people wanted. And this is not an example of something that nobody wanted. Zappos, their minimum viable product was an e-commerce website for shoes. They purchased no shoe inventory when they started with their minimum viable product, but they partnered with local stores. And when someone when someone ordered, they went and bought the shoes from the stores and shipped them. So the goal that they were kind of figuring out was, will people buy shoes online? And they were able to do this by not creating a whole shoe inventory, not having to purchase warehouses or storage facilities in order to house all these shoes. They were able to just partner with local stores. So that's something else to consider when thinking about minimum viable product. What if you have no revenue, and how do you show traction? Investors definitely want to see traction, and it has various levels. Sorry, that shouldn't say various levels. It can be real customers and sales, which equal revenue. It can be pre-sales, it could be signups, pre-sales deposits, alpha or beta customers, right? These are folks that have kind of been with you through your test phases and have already maybe not invested in your idea, but have bought your product or your minimum viable product and shown that they appreciate it, that they want it, that they want more from you. Mailing lists, capturing emails, all that sort of stuff. I also like to share, sorry, I thought it was on this site. But websites and click-throughs to additional pages, like to share that this is more than just social media, right? This is more than just the followers of your products or your ideas Instagram page or LinkedIn page. If you have done personal interviews, capturing thoughts, feedback from people who are interested in this, that's always great to share. Testimonials from emails. And again, any surveys that you send out are great as well. So again, if you have a product description, this is, are folks familiar with Simply Good Jars? This is the non-refrigerated salad in a jar kit that was started actually by a Temple alum. And so the product description that they were able to show was this kind of, this is at the early stage of their company, but just kind of a mock-up of what it would look like to store one of these in your break room, in your lobby at your office. Who's heard of this is a bad example, but Theranos, when they were thinking about glucose monitors, this is for a different company, but this is a first attempt at kind of giving their example of kind of the things that they need. So you can see a lot of text, a lot of stuff happening on here. Great for, again, maybe some of that in the weeds. But I see some folks looking at this and they probably see, right, I don't really know what Medtronic, Dexcom, and Abbott are. I don't really know. I may know a little bit about type 1 and type 2, but what does that tell me? What kind of makeup is that? This slide kind of presents more questions than it does answers, and so that's why it's a first attempt. The second attempt, right, we're getting a little bit better. There's still a lot going on, right? I can maybe kind of see, all right, insulin dosing type 1, and I see some examples of that. Gestational diabetes, okay, again, I may not know what that is, but I see, sorry, again, a blurry picture of a pregnant person. A performance athlete, okay, I know what that is. But again, there's still a lot of text on here. Infection, right, even this in the yellow. There's a lot that's happening there, in addition to, again, a typo with throughput instead of throughout. The third attempt, our mission, no more finger sticks. Okay, this right feels a little bit more simplified and kind of gets us at what we are thinking about for an introductory, or at least kind of a scene setting slide, excuse me. This, right, folks have a good sense of, okay, I've seen people do a pinprick. I see a little droplet of blood, and your mission is to have no more of that. Great, I'm hooked. Let's keep going. So that's a little bit of, these are three kind of different ways to think about how you would kind of get your initial message across. This one, again, maybe does it a little bit, but pretty in the weeds. This one's getting a little bit better, but could use a little bit of work. Here we go. Simple, to the point. There's enough on there to kind of make it worth their while. Intellectual property. I feel like I get asked about this a lot, and I know that folks are sometimes wary of sharing everything that they have that they've thought about, because they don't want their intellectual property to be stolen. I, as a Temple employee and the runner of this competition, I'm not allowed to take your intellectual property. That's in my contract, that's in my agreement, all that sort of stuff. But these are some things to think about. We'll give you some resources in a little bit here about where some places that you can take to kind of make sure that your intellectual property is safe and secure. But these are just some things to think about in terms of, if you want to make sure that your product, if you want to address this with your product, these are some things to maybe think about. This does not apply to every presentation, and it's okay if you do not use this slide in yours. So just wanted to be sure to share that with folks. If you do have a go-to-market strategy, thinking about how you are taking it from the idea stage into the market and hopefully being successful, there are a couple of things to think about. So how will you reach your target customers and drive revenue? What are the marketing channels that you're going to use? How will you make money? What does your revenue model look like? Are you selling direct to customer? Do you have a technology that you're licensing? Is this a subscription model that is going to be, billed on a reoccurring basis? Do you have assets or lease, rent assets or lease assets that you can use? Are you going to offer something that's a freemium version and then a premium version, right? You can kind of get people in with the freemium version, then they see how great it is and they want to pay for the premium. These are all things to think about as you are thinking about taking your idea to market. Some factors to consider when you're thinking about a go-to-market strategy. Again, target audience, channels, packaging and pricing, customer acquisition, and cost strategy. This is, again, kind of a nice, easy, simple blanket slide. If you have a go-to-market strategy, think about a little graphic here for your target audience. Click ahead, the next one shows the channels. Click ahead, the next one shows packaging and pricing. Click ahead, the next one shows customer acquisition and cost strategy. So what are the key messages for your target segments? What is your marketing and sales plan? And then what partnerships or alliances are necessary? I like to emphasize that word necessary, right? It's good to, if you have some partnerships that you think would be great for this, definitely highlight those. And then if you've got some that are just that are absolutely necessary, you want to be sure to highlight that so that the investors, the judges, get a good sense of what's necessary versus what's nice. Again, this is kind of where I like to emphasize and pause for a minute. Do not just say that we will use social media to get the word out, right? It's really hard to do that. Your product needs to take off. You need to quote unquote go viral in order to do so. And so that's not a good strategy to say we will use social media to get the word out. Unless you're going to partner with a bunch of different influencers and you've got kind of this segmented approach to using social media, then you can use that. Otherwise, it's kind of just an empty empty words to say we're going to use social media to get the word out. Here's an example of some go-to market strategies, thinking about events, partnerships, and then direct. And so this is for a software platform, I believe, that matched lawyers up with immigrants and thinking about how they were going to connect to these folks. And so, right, where are the events that you were going to go to that you're going to meet the lawyers? Where are the partnerships that you have that you are working on? And then what are those direct lines of communication that you have, and then same for the immigrant community. So again, this is a nice, right? These are the two kind of segments of this idea, and here's how you are going to kind of capture both of them to make it worth your while. Always like to talk about funding and uses. Again, the hope here is that you are using the money that you win at this competition. I should say, sorry, I should pause. Not just the hope, the expectation is that you will be using the money that you win at this competition for furthering your business. So, how much have you raised? What is the skin in the game that they have? What are some future asks that you might make, right? This would be a good thing to tie into your financial projection. So if you know, hey, I am, currently pitching at the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, but then over the summer I'm prepping to get ready for this investor series that's happening in the fall. That's a great thing to show, not only that you're still actively working on it, but that you've got a plan in place and potentially other money down the line. Always great. How will the funds be used? Summarize this, and if there are different rounds of funding that you're in, talk about how the different funding is going to be used throughout those different rounds. For medical devices and therapeutics, it's important to show clinical trial milestones with funding needs because, again, like kind of as you progress through the FDA or whatever the governing body is of your idea, there are going to be different stages that need different types of funding and different levels within there. So here's a great example, right? This person is going in and asking for $500,000 right now. You can see where that is going towards. You can see, right, the next raise that they are hoping to do after 18 months is 5 to 7 million. And so this investment of $500,000 is going to help us get to this 5 to 7 million by following all of these things. Does that make sense? Okay. Again, if you have an exit strategy, this is a great example slide to show, reassure their investor that they will make money on your opportunity, right? You're not just gonna, take their money and then take the first offer that you get. You want to share with the investor when they will expect their return on investment, if there are multiples that are likely. What will these scenarios look like? Again, if your projections don't require investor funding, you don't need to talk about information about exit strategy. If you're not thinking about, selling this at some point down the line, you do not need to ask about exit strategy, or sorry, include a slide about exit strategy. Again, here's an example of, a slide that you could use if you do have an exit strategy in mind. You can just see kind of how it's laid out here. These are just some basic pitch deck guidelines that we have. I like to highlight a couple of pieces on this slide. The two big ones are the never says. So never say that this estimate is conservative, right? Always give an accurate estimate. If you yourself are naturally kind of more conservative when it comes to that sort of stuff, that's fine. But don't just say this estimate is conservative, because then the question becomes, okay, well, how conservative is it? Do we think it's 1x times that? Do we think it's half an x times that? So those are things to think about. And then never say you have no competition, right? There's always some competition. Very, 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 very rarely do you come up with a brand new, unique idea that has never been done before and nothing like it exists in the world. There's always some sort of competition that out there that can be, tweaked or tailored to the problem that you are trying to solve. And it really just kind of invites some questions from investors of, okay, well, is there actually no competition out there, or did they just not do enough research? And then the last piece that I like to include or that I like to highlight is tell a story, make it compelling, right? I usually like to encourage folks to start with a story and then kind of end with a story. The meat in the middle is important, and that's what folks are going to kind of maybe have the majority of their questions about. But the story is what's going to draw them in. That's what's going to, you know, bind them and connect them to you. And then if you kind of take it home with that at the end, that again kind of ends on that note of this is why I'm doing this. This makes it really important for me, and here's why. So some next steps, encourage folks to utilize all of the resources that are available. You can see them listed here. Attend workshops. Sorry, that slide is not right. It's not financial projections next week. It's market compatibility. Definitely do your research. You know, we are about a month and a half, or I'm sorry, a little over a month away from the submission deadline. And so there's a lot of work to be done. So start to do your research now, validate some of your key assumptions, and then get feedback. My tip for feedback is get feedback from somebody that you know understands your idea, right? If you are designing something in the biotech space, ask a bio professor to take a look at your presentation. If you are in the biotech space, also get somebody who is an English major and has never once taken a biology class to make sure that they understand it as well. Those two people are going to give you very different feedback, both of which are equally important. So I like to share that piece. These are just some quick tips for winning. So understand the requirements, make sure that you have a plan for completing your submission. It's been open for a couple of weeks now. So we're coming down the like I said, the 1 month mark until it's due. The age-old question, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So just keep taking those small bites one at a time. Definitely build a team like we talked about with partners, advisors, mentors, attend our workshops and utilize our mentors. Again, all that information can be found at the beginning of this presentation. Last and most important thing, hit submit on your submission. People always seem to kind of struggle with that. You make it all the way through and then it just ends up saving. So be sure to hit submit in the very bottom right corner when you are ready to submit. You'll also get a confirmation that that's happened as well. Here are some other resources that you can reach out to: the Blackstone Launchpad, the Temple Small Business Development Center, and then the Temple Writing Lab. They're not going to be able to help you with the content, but they are going to be able to help you with flow and proofreading and all that sort of stuff. So definitely take advantage of all of those different things. And I think, yes, that is our last slide. So what I am going to do is I am going to go ahead and I'm going to